Okay, this will be our short segment before we get into the previously recorded segments. So let's pick up with the uh, spring offensive by the Germans in the spring of 1917, or actually in 1918, I'm sorry. So the Americans declare war in 1917. They finally get a relatively decent amount of troops over there by the spring of 1918, although still not anywhere near what was really needed. But in a couple of places, the Meuse-Argonne, where there'll be 1.2 million troops, and then Chateau Thierry, where there'll be quite a few American troops. As the Germans press westward, they will run into strong resistance that includes the American forces at those two key positions. And in those particular situations, the Americans held their own and actually slowed and stopped the Germans. Now, they didn't push them back immediately, but what happened was the Germans had started their big spring offensive and thrown everything they had into it. And the best analogy for this would be if somebody was getting ready to have a big fight, so they worked out as hard as they could, did everything they could possibly do to get as strong as they could, and then they went up to their opponent and hit them as hard as they possibly could. And although their opponent fell back a little bit, their opponent then not only stood up again and looked at them, but began to grow, which is in a sense what would happen with the Allied military forces as more and more Americans arrive each day. And a very interesting phenomenon occurred. As a result of the German offensive bogging down and stopping, the morale of the German troops fell apart. In essence, they knew that they had given it all they had and they were not able to be successful, and that the enemy they were facing was just continually getting stronger. And so German military morale begins to collapse, and the American and British and French forces then begin to push back, as you see with these arrows, against the German forces. And it's probably the greatest military turnaround in human history, because it looked at one point like the Germans would take all they wanted and win the war, but then not only does that not happen, but within the span of a couple of months they're totally turned around and they are then fleeing. And this will lead us to the end of the war, and we'll pick up with the next video to take you through that.